We're all familiar with Roman statues. We see them everywhere, and they're one of the first introductions we all get to the Roman world. While they're beautiful, they might give a false impression of what the Roman world actually looked like because it was really full of color. It wasn't just the plain white marble that we often see. One of the most famous colors of the ancient world is the color purple. A symbol of status, wealth, and often royalty, purple is actually a very difficult color to produce. In this video, we're going to explore the famous Tyrian purple of the ancient world. Tyrian purple is named after the ancient Phoenician city of Tyre, where the color originated. Located on the coast of modern day Lebanon, which is ancient Phoenicia, Tyre was an island city just off the coast where the Phoenician people developed a maritime trading power in the ancient world. The Phoenicians developed an extensive trade network throughout the Mediterranean Sea. Through this network, Tyrian purple soon spread, and the demand for it reached far and wide, including the Phoenician colony of Carthage, which a lot of us know. Tyrian purple has its origins in mythology. According to myth, the color was discovered by a dog, specifically the dog of Tyros, the mistress of the patron god of Tyre, Melkart. In other versions, the dog belonged to Heracles, right, or Hercules, as depicted in this famous painting by Peter Paul Rubens. Since the Greeks and Romans identified Melkart with Heracles, the stories actually share that similarity, and they are basically the same story. According to the myth, the dog came back from the beach having bitten a seashell, which stained its mouth with a reddish purple color. This seashell is a specific one. It's called murex. This shell, when crushed, secretes a liquid which can be used to dye colors purple. Here we can see the ancient shells along with some shards of pottery which still bear that purple stain. We believe the Phoenicians began this dyeing process as early as the 14th century BCE, and it continued on until the fall of Constantinople. The process was highly valued and was kept a secret, and a lot of different places would produce different variants of the purple and try to keep their secret to produce the best one. Much like the ancient silk of China or ancient China, this secret is something that would be very valuable. These murex shellfish, they live in deeper waters, and they're caught by using baited traps with floats on top of the water. After being crushed and left in the sun, the liquid from the glands was collected. In his Natural History, Pliny the Elder actually describes the process as taking 3 days, with salt being added to the crushed shellfish and boiled down. Fibers were dyed before being woven into garments. And we can see it here. This is a quote from Pliny. It says, like the murex, they keep themselves in concealment for 30 days, about the time of the rising of the dog star. In the spring season, they unite in large bodies, and by rubbing against each other, produce a viscous spittle, from which a kind of wax is formed. The murex does the same, but the purple has that exquisite juice which is so greatly sought after for the purpose of dyeing cloth, situate in the middle of the throat. This secretion consists of a tiny drop contained in a white vein from which the precious liquid used for dyeing is distilled, being of the tint of a rose somewhat inclining to black. The rest of the body is entirely destitute of this juice. It is a great point to take the fish alive, for when it dies, it spits out this juice. From the larger ones, it is extracted after taking off the shell, but the small fish are crushed alive together with the shells, upon which they eject this secretion. So that quote is from Pliny the Elder, like I said, the Natural History, and it's a translation by J. Bostic. It's one you can find online. This I pulled from Perseus, so you can find different translations of it. But it gives you a good sense of how this murex shell was crushed up, and you get this purple dye. This is another quote from Pliny where he kind of goes into the value and the importance of this product and how to get it. So he said the most favorable season for taking these fish is after the rising of the dog star, or else before spring. For when they have once discharged their waxy secretion, their juices have no consistency. This, however, is a fact unknown in the dyers' workshops, although it is a point of primary importance. After it is taken, the vein is extracted, which we have previously spoken of, to which it is requisite to add salt, a sextarius, about to every 100 pounds of juice. It is sufficient to leave them to steep for a period of 3 days, and no more, for the fresher they are, the greater virtue there is in the liquor. It is then set to boil in vessels of tin, and every 100 amphorae ought to be boiled down to 500 pounds of dye, by the application of a moderate heat. for which purpose the vessel is placed at the end of a long funnel, which communicates with the furnace. While thus boiling, the liquor is skimmed from time to time, and with it the flesh, which necessarily adheres to the veins. About the 10th day, generally, the whole contents of the cauldron are in a liquefied state, upon which a fleece, from which the grease has been cleansed, is plunged into it by way of making trial. But until such time as the color is found to satisfy the wishes of those preparing it, the liquor is still kept on the boil. The tint that inclines to red is looked upon as inferior to that which is of a blackish hue. The wool is left to lie and soak for 5 hours, and then, after carding it, it is thrown in again until it has fully imbibed the color. So again, here what we're seeing from Pliny is a really good description of how you can take the murex shells, crush them down and boil them and get them to secrete this liquid, and then what you can do with it. And you're hearing about this sort of double dipping process where you're trying to get a color that's really kind of dark, rich purple. He mentioned the red being slightly less valuable, and if you can get it to a darker purple, it's worth a lot more money. So we're starting to see a little bit about the process and again, how valuable it can be. So this extensive process gives us insight into why the color was so valuable, often being worth its weight in gold according to some estimates. In 301 CE, under the rule of Emperor Diocletian, we have record that 1 pound of the purple dye would cost 150 denarii, or around 150,000 denarii, or around 3 pounds of gold. The demand for the color was actually so high that the murex was driven almost to the brink of extinction. Here's another quote. So in here, we have again from Pliny a quote that says, "In Asia, the best purple is that of Tyre, in Africa, that of Meninx, and the parts of Gaetulia that border on the ocean, and in Europe, that of Laconia." So we can see here that the Phoenicians didn't just export the dye, but the process too. And as we see, the purple dye production in many of their overseas colonies, such as Carthage. So you can see here that it says in Asia, the best purple is that of Tyre, but it's made in different places. These are where they would ship off the process of making this purple to their colonies and how it spread through the Mediterranean. Other manufacturing centers included Rhodes, Lesbos, Sicily, and southern Italy. That being said, Tyre always remained the most valuable location for the dye, as Pliny tells us here, right? He mentions it particular or specifically that Tyre is where you can get the best purple. So the clothing created by Tyrian Purple was a beautiful reddish purple color. So these are some modern recreations of purple dyes created by extracting liquid from seashells. And the one that's probably the closest to ancient purple is on top. And you can see that it does have a bit of a reddish sort of hue to it. It's not perfectly purple the way we would think of it today. Though we can imagine that different shades could be achieved depending on the shells and the process, right? And there's also an idea that if you dip the garment a couple times, you can get it to be darker. But this is where, when we talk about Tyrian purple, it's a little bit tricky to visualize exactly what it would look like because the shades are different depending on what shells you use and kind of where you make the garment and where the color purple comes from. It was a luxury item, though, and it held a status reserved for upper-class Romans. So the highest quality would have been twice dipped, like I said, in order to achieve a richer color. This dyeing process produced color that would resist fading, too. Here we see some examples of Tyrian purple from the past. So on the left, we have Emperor Justinian wearing a purple robe, and on the right, we have his wife, Empress Theodora. And you can see that the purple, right, is not exactly what you would think for sort of a bright or kind of rich purple. It definitely has a bit of that reddish to it, but you can see that they are wearing purple, and it would have been very expensive and very valuable what they have on. Here you can see some upper class Romans wearing the toga praetexta, and in this painting, right, you can see it's got more of a reddish purple color. Almost being a very red. So again, you can get a sense of exactly what it was. It's not quite, again, that bright purple you might be thinking of, and it would depend on where you got it from, but that reddish purple color is very, very valuable, right? It's really only worn by the upper class Romans because it's very expensive. And here's another one. You can actually see here part of the burial shroud of Emperor Charlemagne, which was made of gold, which you can see, and Tyrian purple from Constantinople, right? So Constantinople becomes a big producer preserved this color into the Middle Ages, right? You can see here that darkish purple color on his burial shroud, right? That's because he is royalty, and that color gets reserved for royalty. The value of this purple dye really can't be underestimated, as we find it listed among the tribute that Tyre actually had to pay to the Assyrian kings in the 9th and 8th centuries BCE, along with gold and silver. So the idea is if you find the color purple kind of being on the same level as gold and silver, you can see how incredibly valuable it is. And we have Alexander the Great, right? He was said to have found a stash of that purple dyed cloth after his capture of Susa. And again, that highlights its immense value, because this is something that was being hidden in sort of the treasure trove of the city, and Alexander takes it because it is so valuable. So the lasting legacy of the color purple can still be seen today, as it's still considered the color of royalty, and many examples of purple can be seen worn by rulers throughout history. Here you can see them, right? We have a couple of different instances, and they're all wearing the color purple, including the crown jewels over to the right. So purple has this very long-standing tradition of being a valuable color, and you can really trace it back to the Phoenicians in this purple that they're making, because it is difficult, it's very expensive, very valuable, and that's why you really have it reserved for royalty in the upper class. So if you want to learn more about Tyrian Purple, this is just a short culture video on it that I like to use with my students just to introduce them to the idea. But there's a lot of great resources out there. Check online, you'll find some amazing things. So do some digging, find something that you like. It might be a video, it might be an article. There's a ton out there. You'll get a lot of great information. And again, if you're interested in this, keep learning and have some fun with it. If you have any questions at all, always feel free to put them in the comments below. But otherwise, get out and explore. And hopefully this will kind of expand your mind a little bit as to why the color purple does show up whenever you're learning about Latin or Roman culture. And now you have a little bit of a better sense of where it came from.